Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, the choir's had a long relationship with the Onondaga Nation. We actually did one of our first concerts out at the old school before new school was built. And tonight we're going to first take a look at a little bit of the thinking of Robin Kimmerer, who's also a choir member and sang with us for a while. And I know she and Angie are good friends and work together. So and we'll give Angie and Maureen and Hazel time to respond a little bit to the video or talk about it. So who we have tonight as our guests are Angela Ferguson, who's Onondaga Nation Eel Clan. And I've heard about your work, Angie. You've been working in the Onondaga Nation Community Garden as a supervisor and also a founding member of Braiding the Sacred movement, which is, you'll tell about collecting seeds, corn seeds from across Turtle Island, and lots more, I'm sure, that you have done and we'll talk about. And Hazel is a member of the Oneida Bear Clan. She's also sung with the choir and has done a lot of work around just thinking about this kind of thing. And then Maureen also is a member of the Onondaga Eel Clan and has sung with the choir. So we're happy to hear all of your thinking. What we're going to do first is play the video from Robin. Robin Kimmerer is not going to be here, but we have a video from her, and then we'll let Angie and respond or talk about it a little, and if Hazel and Maureen do too, and then we'll show your other video and move on to your projects. Whenever you want, Angie, we'll do whatever you want. So that's a loose agenda item. So first we'll show the video from Robin.
Is that you, Steve, or should I show it?
Working on it. Be there in a moment.
Okay, great.
If I could choose just a single element of the traditional teachings that we're called to pick up, it would be the teachings of the honorable harvest, which were taught us by the plants, who give us everything that we need. It's a covenant of reciprocity between humans and the living world, a very sophisticated ethical protocol. One of the first steps of the honorable harvest is to understand that the lives that we are taking are the lives of generous beings, of sovereign beings. And in order to accept their gift, we owe them at least our attention. To care for them, we must know what they need. And at the very minimum, we should know their names. And yet, the average American can name over 100 corporate logos and 10 plants. Is it a surprise that we have accepted a political system that grants personhood to corporations and no status at all for wild rice and redwoods? The protocols for the honorable harvest are not really written down, but if they were, it would look something like this. When you get to the woods, you don't just start grabbing everything in sight. We're taught never to take the first plant that you see, and that means you'll never take the last. This is a prescription with inherent conservation value. And then if we encounter another plant, we ask permission. I've always been taught to address that plant, to introduce myself and tell it what it is that I have come for. If you're going to take a life, you have to be personally accountable for it. I know there are places where if you talk to a plant, they think you are crazy, but in our way, it's just good manners. If you're going to ask, you have to listen for the answer. You can listen in different ways, pragmatically, intuitively. Look around, see whether those plants have enough to share. And if the answer is no, you go home. For we remember that they don't belong to us. And taking without permission is also known as stealing. and the honorable harvest councils that we also take in such a way that does the least harm and in a way that benefits the growth of the plant. Use everything that you take. It's disrespectful of the life that's given to waste it. The next tenet of the honorable harvest is to share it with others, human and non. The earth has shared generously with us, so we have to model that behavior in return. And a culture of sharing, we know, is a culture of resilience. Plant gatherers often leave a spiritual gift behind, but it can also be a material gift. Weeding, caretaking, spreading seeds, helping those plants to flourish. We give songs, we give ceremony, we give our respect, we give fertilizer. Every breath that you take is a breath that was made for you by plants. The water that you drink, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're on a remote mountaintop, we still are recipients of those gifts. And if we take the time to be grateful, that brings us into that state of humility, of understanding that we are not at the top of a biological hierarchy, that in fact we are the younger brothers of creation.
Angela, we'll turn it over to you first, I guess. You have to unmute. Angela, you need to unmute.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I thought that was great. I agree with all of the things that she said. It was, the values of when you're going out to harvest, it's a whole relationship between you, the land, and the plants. And there's also foresight involved where you're thinking of future generations. Am I waiting for Hazel and Maureen to join in as well, or am I speaking initially?
This is
Okay.
Alice. Go, you say whatever comes to your mind right now. I'm not seeing Hazel and Maureen on just yet, so it's all you.
Okay. Well, when we do our harvesting, those are the same philosophies that we use here, on the Onondaga Nation. We never take our first plant. We usually take, a few more steps in before we do that. And we also do offerings, we leave an offering there for the plant, and there is communication between the person who's harvesting and what you're going to be picking. So sometimes those things are foraged goods that are growing in the forest or in the fields or in the trees or in the berry bushes, and other times it's in the garden, so one of the teachings that was kind of powerful for me, that I learned from one of the gentlemen, an elderly gentleman from the Red Lake Nation in Minnesota. He told me that on a cob of corn, there's 3 areas on that cob, and the very first on the end was meant for birds and animals. They all have a duty, all the little kernels on the cob. And he was saying that on the end of that cob, when you see birds pecking at it, it's like the birds know that that's for them. And that's when it's time to pick your corn, when you see the birds start swooping in the garden and pecking at the corn. And sometimes if bugs or something gets into the corn, they'll kind of nibble on the ends there. They don't take the whole thing. They only, even the bugs and the animals will only nibble on that end part. And then the center part, he would use his hands to show the 3 areas, because usually you can only fit just about 3 times your hand on the cob. And in the center, where your fist can fit around. Those are seeds for the future generations. And then what's left on the end is the food for the people. So he was teaching us that when you harvest, and if the birds see that the humans didn't come out into the garden to pick their corn or to take what they were supposed to harvest at that time, they'll come back and nibble on that second part, and they'll always leave that last part. And it's true, because I picked corn today and I found a few cobs that were like that. And then they leave the food for the people. So there's this really magical process where even animals carry thoughts, and they're thinking in a process of not taking everything. And I find that very remarkable, because every year when we harvest, it's the same way. And that kind of stuck with me. So I thought that was something I could share. We're in full swing right now in the harvest at the Onondaga Nation, and with all the rain, it's been so difficult. But we're so thankful for the rain, because many other Indigenous people are suffering right now through drought, and they didn't get a harvest. And we're trying to come up with ways to collaborate with other Indigenous people to say, if they come in that situation again, that perhaps we could share growing responsibilities and grow some food up here in the northern regions, the Northeast, the Midwest, the upper Midwest, to help out our brothers and sisters in the Southwest. So we're trying to create this trade network, I guess you could say, where a lot of times they have different things that we can't get up here because they don't grow in the Northeast. And we're trying to reopen the ancient trade routes that we used to use with our food as our currency. So we're eliminating the value of the almighty dollar and creating relationships with people again, and using our food and our gifts from the forest and the lands to provide sustenance for all of the people. I know everybody is muted. I'm not sure if you want me to answer any questions or anything like that.
Why don't you tell us about the community garden project and all of your work there first, and then we'll talk about the other. Is just everything that you're thinking and
Okay.
doing.
So for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, like she told you, my name is Angela Ferguson. My Onondaga name is Dewasitos. And we started up a project here. I had worked for about 10 years here on the nation for one of the chiefs who's no longer with us. And at that time, we were just growing food for the elders in our community who couldn't really manage a garden anymore, but they still enjoyed having the foods. And in 2015, we decided, let's do that for the whole community so that we can encourage people to get back to eating their traditional foods and get back to their wellness, because many of our people suffer from diabetes and heart disease and other things that are affecting their health. And it just kind of grew from there. We started out with 5 girls, but now we have, quite a large crew. We also have men that hunt and fish, but we cover all aspects of what we call food sovereignty, feeding ourselves, providing food for the people of the Onondaga Nation, and not just our people on the nation, but throughout the Confederacy, and then all across New York State. We have all 6 nations in Canada. And then we also, like I said, do food trading. So it's really enjoyable work. We do everything earth friendly. So we pull weeds by hand, we harvest by hand, we plant by hand. We don't use machinery to put the seeds in the ground. And, our food gets a lot of attention throughout the year. So, oh, sorry, I just saw a question pop up. But what we do is we're trying to think of preparing, and in light of this pandemic that was such a shock to people's system, our people were quite secure because we've been working on this project, like I said, since 2015, and now it's 2021. And, you know, part of our work that we do is to always think of the future generations. So we have food that's put away for everybody. That part of that harvest is always put away in case of a food crisis, food shortage, a world disaster, a pandemic, and all of those things. And so it was really enjoyable to be able to cook some of those traditional foods throughout this time. In the last couple of years, the food provided a lot of joy to our community members. And the food is given to all the community members at no charge. So the food is free. So we have a weekly farmers market, you know, when all of the plants are in full swing. We just did a big squash giveaway last week, and we gave away venison and buffalo meat and elk meat and fish. And it's really enjoyable. The community members really love it. And I've traveled around to a lot of different communities trying to encourage all of the communities to do such a thing, to create this project where people can have this sacred space in those gardens, out hunting, and they're feeling like they're really contributing, you know, into their community. So the men are out hunting and fishing, and the women are doing the gardening part of that and the seed keeping and all of that. So, you know, our women are really important when it comes to being seed carriers, because women are born as a seed carrier, because we carry the seeds to human beings inside of our bodies as soon as we're born. And oops, sorry, my light went out. And it's a huge responsibility, but it's very enjoyable. And that's a lot of the work that Robin and I have shared. We have a lot of the same thoughts when it comes to seeds and foods and harvesting, and really kind of treating our food not as a hierarchy, but that our food is alive. You know, even plants, they carry that energy, which is transferred to our bodies. So all of the work at the farm has been like an open door for some students and younger people to come and learn at the farm. So the farm is also a classroom, you know, and we're making connections there. And we also do a lot of food preparation. So you can provide ingredients to people, but if they don't know how to prepare them or make them taste good, then it becomes, you know, kind of difficult. So we've been doing traditional cooking methods and even relearning ourselves. How do we prepare some of these old recipes, you know? And that's where our elders come in, because they're so valuable. They have all of that information for us. So the garden project and the whole farm project in itself has reconnected us to our ancestral lands, and also reconnected us to our elders, and kind of bridged the gap between our older and young people.
I know Maureen is here now, not to
Hi,
interrupt
Maureen.
you. Do you want to comment on either the honorable harvest or the work of the garden or anything else?
Actually, yeah, Hazel's here with me.
Okay, both of you, great.
Well, I did think about that, and part of too what I saw trying to take the positive out of this pandemic was with the shutdown, and as it went, a lot more people did utilize their gardens and start gardening again. I being one of them. And that gave them more time to do these things and kind of bring us back to our roots and who we are as people. And I found that it was, and a lot of people found that it was very relaxing too, you know. And even if you couldn't go anywhere, you could at least go to your garden. You know, you might not be able to go visiting again, and you always have those people waving at you when you're out in your garden and going by. So you know there was still kind of some form of interaction, even if we couldn't meet together. You know, so that was a plus, and I think that's kind of important for us as Haudenosaunee people, is the community, because we're all about community. So for me, it was definitely, I think, an eye-opener for a lot of people. not just on the nation, but everywhere to really reflect and take the time to like, where are we going and where do we want to go? You know, like that, and start kind of looking into the future and realizing, like Anne said, where I was taught to think of the next generations. Not too many people have that mindset. But I think this whole entire pandemic started to change people and give them different ways to look at things, because, you know, some people were like, oh my goodness, probably the closest they've been to death. And so some people rethought it, and some people are okay with what they're doing. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't know if there's anything else to say. So, I mean, that's all I have to say. So, tell you, Ange.
Well, I think Maureen is so right. And one of the really important things to me that really made my heart sing is that we have a little tiny nation. We're one of the smallest land bases, you know, like some of the other nations in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy have a quite large land base. And we have this tiny little spot. And on our spot, our little Onondaga Nation, we had 96 gardens during the pandemic. That is a lot of gardening for a small community like that. And we were able to share seeds with so many people. And, you know, some people, it gave them time to become a part of the farm too, that maybe were busy with their jobs or other things. And it encouraged them to have all these, there was just beautiful gardens all over. I was telling Hazel, I kept staring at her garden during the pandemic because her corn was so tall. And this year Maureen has tall corn. So yeah, that was enjoyable.
Amazing. This is Allison again. Thank you so much for sharing about that. And we'd love to also hear and see more about the Braiding the Sacred project. So we have a video to share about that, and then you can tell us more about it. And if Maureen and Hazel have anything to weigh in on, they can do that. And at the end, after that, we'll have some time for Q&A. We'll meet in small groups briefly as well after that. So yeah, Steve will pull up that video about the documentary, and then you can tell us more, Angie. Thanks for running tech, Steve.
I don't actually have a link to that documentary.
Okay, I'll pull it up. Or do you want me to send you the link again?
Where did you send it?
Direct message on Zoom.
Okay.
So it's just that first one, the Carl Barnes documentary trailer.
Okay, talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
So Angie, I'm interested also in hearing from the three of you about how you see your relationship as a human to both to the plants. I think, go ahead.
Well, I consider myself a sister to the plants. You know, I think of myself as, you know, I have a relationship. Sometimes it's even maternal. I feel real motherly towards the plants. I'm real protective of the gardens, and, you know, I try to pay attention to the messages that it gives to me. I feel like it's a lifelong learning, and I learn something new every year from the gardens. You know, one year I actually witnessed this. I saw corn. It was just starting to rain, and I saw these clouds roll in, and I saw the corn move, and it started like rotating in slow motion. And what it was doing is it was curling up the leaves because it knew it was going to rain, and it was making these little cups to catch the raindrops to make a funnel for them to go down to the plant. It was so beautiful and amazing. And I thought, gee, if I don't learn how to slow down a little and pay attention to that stuff, you miss it. So I think of it as a friendship, a relationship, you know. That's how I feel about it. What about you, Hazel?
Hi.
I would kind of have to say too, like last year with the garden, we had so much more time and it seemed like everything was moving so slow that I had so much time to be in the garden. And, you know, I'd get up in the morning and I'd look forward to going, excuse me, out to the garden and, you know, and just sitting out there. And then my garden's near the road. And like Maureen said, people would go by and that was my connection to everybody. Like, you know, even if it was a stop and a wave but I also was learning the seed songs. So I was learning to sing those songs in the garden and I guess there's no words to explain that feeling, like that connectedness to the just getting my hands back into the soil myself because I was so busy and it was hard. And this year it even seems like, you know, we're almost getting back into our fast pace. And like Ange said, I had to remind myself to get back there and slow down and go talk to my plants. And I was one of those ones that wondered about that. And then here I am sitting in the garden having a conversation, but it was so real. And I guess I can't even put that into words, like that feeling that I got from it. And that's why I encourage so many others to do it. And I encourage the youth to do this too. And really pay attention to those plants because it almost feels like you can, like I could feel them talking back to me, like not talking, but the way they swayed or the way that, you know, they were happy. I could see that they were green and they appreciated that song. So, and I think that's important to tell everybody here since we all love to sing. I think that's why we're here. You know, the trees, everybody, they need to hear our songs, just like we need the birds to hear their songs. They need to hear ours too. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thanks so much, Hazel.
I want to hear more about that seed song, but maybe after the
Yeah.
Maureen, did you want to say something?
You're muted.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that this year because this year, like last year I got crazy. I had during the beginning of the pandemic, I had 4 gardens I was in. And again, that was kept me busy, you know, kept my mind off of what was going on. And, you know, so, and again, I was outside. I'm really, I don't mind being alone. I'm not much of a crowd person myself. So that was really good for me. And this year I had my own garden, like Ange said, in my yard. And it was almost like entering a whole different world. When you enter the garden, it's like you're entering a whole different area. And I, you know, all the things that were around me just kind of seemed to disappear. And it was really nice. And I'd get into my corn and it was just felt like sometimes it felt like they were just hugging me, you know, because it's like all of a sudden I feel something on my shoulder and it's one of the corns, you know, and I'm like, oh, hey, how you doing? And I was same thing. I probably look crazy in my garden, talking to my gardener, sitting in the middle of my garden and having a conversation. I always talk to my peppers because my peppers did really good this year. And I was like, so happy. Apologized if I was, you know, I'm sorry, I'm still new. I kept reminding them that. Please forgive me, I'm still learning, you know. So, but it is like, you know, you just get transported into a whole different world with that. And so I would recommend anybody could, even if it's not it doesn't have to be a huge garden, you know, I would recommend gardening.
Shall we see the video now? Right.
Carl's life was spent preserving something that was so valuable to the Native American community.
Here is a man that his work, it was and is the greatest agricultural achievement of any human being.
He had been saving these varieties of seeds, and I went into his corn room, and there's these jars filled with all these different seeds, thousands of different jars.
His life's work was planting these seeds and taking care of them, and people would send him seeds, and so this collection just kept growing and growing and growing.
Whoever put that together, it was not a hobby, it was a passion.
He stopped me when I walked into that room and told me that I was standing in the presence of greatness. His life was spent trying to get the seeds back to their families.
For him to see a vision of getting nations together.
2014, Carl passed. His son called me one day and said, "I know that you love Dad and you loved his collection, and we want you to have it." Well, that was a huge honor. I didn't know what to do with it, though. And part of me thought that's the end of it. I really did. I thought, well, everything he'd done is gone. The things I do, I couldn't devote the time and effort that he did into that project. I knew it.
Something needs to be done.
We knew right then and there that this was something so much bigger than us.
Hapa.
Onaha.
Tunchi.
Nada.
Aneo.
Onast Zot O.
Selu.
So that was just a little clip. There's so much stories that go along with that. I could go on and on. But as you see, those are some photographs that we took of the seed collection. Carl Barnes was a Cherokee corn farmer who lived in the panhandle of Oklahoma and spent his entire life dedicated to corn. He spoke the language of the corn. He could communicate with corn. And every time I see that video and I see those little jars, one of the things that's not, you don't see in the video, but I experienced is when I opened some of the jars, he would get messages from the corn and he would write them on little tiny pieces of paper and fold them up like fortune cookies and put them inside the seeds. And so all these years later, sometimes I'll open one of those jars and I find the little notes inside in his handwriting. And it's very emotional when that happens because, you know, some of those notes were written 30 years ago or longer. And they're not really his words. He's even writing that in the note. This is what the corn told me. So when I work on that collection, Robin was a big part of that. She brought some Indigenous students there. You can see some of them in the photo, and they came to help us get it all organized, touch every single seed, open every single jar, sing to the seeds, and all that stuff. And he had over 4,000 varieties of corn in that collection. And some of those seeds are the last there is on Earth. And the work is not done yet because we only did half of that collection. We're still working on it. It took us 3 years for what you see in the photos. And we probably have a few more years to keep going to get it finished. But it's really fantastic work. And we had a lot of young people. Every Saturday, I had some young girls between the ages of 7 and 17 come over to help so that we could build some seed carriers and seed keepers for the future. And the girls they were magical. They just had such, they picked it right up like as if they'd been doing it forever, you know. And Braiding the Sacred, we as a collective, we make sure that we rematriate a lot of those seeds because when Indigenous people were removed from one location and taken to another spot, a lot of times the seeds got lost in the shuffle. So we end up getting to bring some of those seeds back to their original homelands. And when that happens, it's very intense, because it's almost as if relatives are coming home to the people. So the seeds are always going through ceremonies and protection. And our Grand Council of Chiefs here in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, I brought this information to all of them so that all 6 nations would know that we were going to caretake for this, and that the whole Confederacy was going to support that effort and also protect our seeds from their, the way that they are right now and the way that they've always been, to keep them in their true natural form with no genetic modification, and to get them back in the ground. Really, they're not just something for show. It's a living seed library where they're always moving, and they're always in gardens throughout the year. We have up to almost 100 people that help us grow different varieties out every year, because obviously we can't grow them all here. And each year we get another person who joins, and then they get hooked, because it's fun to grow a variety you never did before. It's like Christmas when the harvest comes. So Carl did all of this work as an individual, and it truly is miraculous. I really don't know how anyone could have done what he did. I don't think it's ever going to be replaced. And so now we've created this whole community of Indigenous corn growers that are helping us do this out all over Turtle Island. We have people in the Southeast, the Northwest, in Oregon, in Minnesota, in Canada, North Carolina, all through the Midwest. I mean, there's so many people helping, and it's really created a lot of buzz and a lot of good relationships. The basis of that. Oh, go ahead.
That is amazing. Oh my God.
The point of the little quick blurb of the documentary is that we want to show people, not just Indigenous people, but we want to show people around the world how one human being truly can create a ripple effect that can affect millions of people. And it can work in a positive way, just like he did, because he was doing it all for all of us. He wasn't thinking of himself. So some of the seeds in the collection, the people are extinct. They're not here anymore. There are no more of those particular people, but their corn lived on. And we have corn all throughout the Americas, not just North America, Central America, South America. And we've returned seeds to people in some of those areas who have taken it back to Cuba and Puerto Rico, things that were lost, since the time of Columbus landing there. So it's been very, very powerful work. And it's that collection I'm really very, very maternal about. They're like all my babies, and I have to go in there all the time, and I sing to them, and they love little kids, and little kids love going in that room, and they love to see little kids, and little kids love the seeds. And so, it's quite an undertaking, but I feel really privileged that we get to be a part of the work to carry it forward. So.
Maureen and Hazel, you got any comments before we open it up to everybody else? It's really incredible work.
No, we're good, thanks.
You are good. Shall we open it up for people to ask questions now and make comments? And to Angie or Maureen and Hazel. And I don't know, Angie, do you have any wrapping up? That was a great wrapping up sentence that you just did. Let's ask some questions or comments.
This is Allison. If folks want to unmute themselves to ask a question, or you can ask it in the chat and we'll read it out for you. Earlier, we had a question from Karen Remley. In what other ways can we honor our Indigenous community other than the passive, in my opinion, way we honor people at the beginning of meetings and church services? And anyone can field the question, Maureen, Hazel, or Angie.
Well, for me, I have a lot of relationships that I remind people that we have treaties with all of our neighbors, and especially all of us who live here in what citizens of the United States call New York State, and the citizens of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, we consider it that. But we have a relationship to one another that's called Gaswenta. And that relationship is that we will always travel side by side, and we will share in our cultures and our paths, but not impose those ways on one another. That there's this mutual respect and there's this mutual relationship, and it's based on friendship. It's not based on you stay over there and we stay over here kind of thing. It's based on creating a union based on respect, I guess you could say, and having that good relations so that we can always help and protect and further our relationship to the land, to help steward the land. And the more that people learn about that, because people always think of it as something that's governmental, right? That's the one government to another, when really it's citizen to citizen. It's one person to the other. And I think the more we teach our young people about that relationship, so that there isn't a division, amongst people, and it creates more harmony. I think that's one great way to, to educate people on how we can be a more perfect relationship, I guess you could say.
Yeah. We have a question from Tarky Heath. Could you speak to the importance of gathering along with gardening? Thank you.
Well, I find that for me personally, the garden leads you to gather, because just like you have to harvest, if you're looking around your garden where you plant, there's natural weeds and things that pop up, and some of those are medicinal. They're also edible. And so the garden leads you to start looking around at other things that you can learn about, that you can actually use, so there is a purpose for those plants. And once they show up and you see them, it's almost like it's calling you, like, go learn about me. I showed up here for a reason. I'm a helper to maybe your garden or you, because there's certain plants that keep bugs out of gardens or keep the animals away because they don't like the smell of it, or, things like that. So when you get in the fields, that leads you to the edges of the fields, which is the forest. And you'll start noticing berries growing along the woods edge or things like that. And it leads you into further, you see mushrooms and all different nuts on the trees that are falling. When you hear them tinking on the rooftop, they're calling you to come get them. So, you'll hear a nut fall. Whoa, what was that noise? And there's so many things that it all goes together, so that when they see people, I feel like when trees and other plants see people in the gardens, they're like, oh, those are the people that pay attention. So we have to make them notice us, and we got to get them to utilize us as well. And that's actually how I have found my own path has led me to start to more foraging, not just in the gardens, but also the wild and edible foods that are out there, free food. And now you're allowing them to complete their life purpose. And that reminds us that, we live like that, right? We live until we complete our life purpose. And then there's the young people that it's their turn, right? And so that's the way I see harvesting other things besides your garden. Hazel and Maureen love to forage, so let's hear from them too.
I have a question. Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hi, this has been wonderful to listen to. I know exactly that feeling. I'm anxious to hear about the children, so when you started out in 2015, I believe, now I'm see how the children have responded with their interest in learning, not just about gardening and a lot of the teachings, but just there's so many levels, the spiritual level and the ramifications to extend in throughout the country and the world. So how has it been for the children?
Well, it's been, for me, I've had a great experience with the kids, not only my own grandchildren, but many families came up, to the farm to participate in harvest and bring their whole family, almost like a little pod of people to work together and bring the kids. And because the kids, I tell them all the time, this is your farm, so now they feel a sense of ownership for the place, like to realize I can go there, I can grow stuff. We even have, like, if somebody wants to grow their own things, or say maybe they don't want to have a big garden at their house, they can have their own little patch up at the farm. And some of them have done that. That's part of community gardening, is when someone doesn't want to have a whole big garden in their yard, or they can't, or maybe they don't have enough room, they can do it up there. And we can also help with weeding and things like that. So some of the kids really enjoy the seed part, but also some of the young people now are wanting to learn how to hunt and, go back to using arrows and learn to shoot arrows with their learning to make the flints, so it all leads back to things. And one story that's really cute is one little girl that came up there saw that we all work there, and there's a time clock, and so we always drink, we're buzzing in, zzz, you hear the little zzz of the time clock, and she was like, Ange, I need a time card because I'm busy working up here, 'cause she's working in the garden and the seeds. And I was like, okay. And I made her a little time card. And every time she comes up to the farm, she goes, bzz, she buzzes her little time card, and she has her own little spot on the thing. And I just thought that was so cute, because she feels like, when I'm up here, I got to work. I'm going to do something, and I just thought that was great. But yeah, it motivated a lot of the kids to want to have their own little garden. And at our nation school, the kids get seeds, they help us harvest, they braid corn, they get to take their seeds home. They had a garden right at the school now, so they can grow their own stuff and tend to it there. Each grade had a row. So we had pre-K had a little row, and then kindergarten, first, second, third. And that way the whole garden became a community garden like that. And so pre-K was only like responsible to get out there and pull their weeds in the pre-K row. And we thought of small plants, that were easy to tend, and the harder things were for the older kids. So yeah, the kids are a big part of the process, because that's our future.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Great. We had someone ask if they could unmute and ask a question. Shelbel?
Yes. Hi. My name is Stephanie. She, her is good for me. I had a question. The kind of philosophy of the honorable harvest is really great and talks a lot about, sustainability and practices, especially with foraging. But one of the things that I find that a lot of people, when they talk about foraging, they talk about foraging invasive species that are not native here, or invasive species that are taking over spots that they shouldn't be. They're more aggressive plant. What are your feelings about honorable harvest and kind of maybe invasive species that aren't supposed to be here, like you can harvest knotweed, and maybe not being quite as kind to them, maybe trying to see if you can stop the spread that we have, especially in my area along a lot of the waterways?
Well, there's a lot of, I guess I could use plantain as like a good example, right? So they call that like the footstep of when people came across the ocean, that's a foreign plant that came with them, right? Seeds were carried on people's feet. And so that plant has so many medicinal values that we didn't know at the time. And it's everywhere, you know, everywhere all over America. You can find plantains. And I think one of the things that we as Indigenous peoples we're pretty optimistic, I could say. So when there's something that we can find that we can work with it and use that as something medicinal for our people, we have. And we've also gone back to a lot of the traditional methods of agriculture, which was almost the way we did steward the land, which was like having burns in the springtime, you know, so that we were not reseeding a lot of these things that were, you know, not indigenous to here. So if you want some of those grasses, those natural things that are native to the land here, it's a lot to learn, but I found that doing the controlled burns, you know, helps a lot of that. And some of them are real stubborn. You have to actually dig up roots and be really dedicated to get those things out of the land. So, you know, they really want to see how dedicated you are to their removal. But if there is a purpose that you can find, and so that way you have some type of symbiotic relationship with some of the invasive species, you know, there might be a purpose for them. There might be a reason for them. I've had some plants show up in the garden that I'm like, oh, I keep trying to pull the weeds out. And then I realize later through some of my travels and meeting people, I find out that that's that like the corn would call a helper every year to help it. And I'll find that that plant was putting certain nutrients. So there's like a lot of biology things that you could really research, and it becomes very interesting. A lot of times science catches up with indigenous teachings, and I love it when that happens. They just kind of jive. And it's like, we've been telling you that for a long time. But once it's like established in science, then it's a fact, right? So yeah, but that's they're actually going back to that, doing the controlled burns, and that's almost unnecessary now with so many invasive species.
Yes. So as a follow-up, if you don't mind, really quickly, with like controlled burns and stuff, do you guys, I don't know, with the farm, I guess you probably won't do it as much, but in like forests and like grassland areas, do you have someone that you talk to help teach how to do that? Because it's something that, you know, people can look into for their private property or.
Well, yeah, we also, Hazel works for a great organization called the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force, and that's one of their main purposes is to, you know, protect our lands and to keep us like aware when these things are coming, and kind of notify our community of things that they're seeing less of or more of, and you know, taking stock of nature. And I think that's really important because we do work through that office, through the Haudenosaunee Environmental Task Force, but we also work with Robin Kimmerer and Neil Patterson, you know, at the School of Environmental Science and Forestry, and through the Indigenous Studies program there. And we're kind of getting on board with a lot of the local universities to kind of integrate some of our philosophies in with the teachings that are being, you know, given at the schools, because a lot of the schools that are in this territory, it's beneficial when they have both sets of knowledge, you know. But that's the way I've worked. So I'm not sure. Hazel might be able to speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and we kind of have to move a little, kind of wrap this up in a minute, but Hazel, do you want to talk about that at all, or where are you?
Sure.
Yeah, hi.
I know you're on a time limit, so I'll just go real quick, but as Ange has said, we are lucky that we work with, we have a lot of connections, like with ESF, with SU, with Cornell, willing to share that information with us. One of the other invasive plants that I think of that we've been really looking into is the Phragmites. I mean, you look on the roadside and they're everywhere. But what we're finding is people out west are using the Phragmites to make mats, and there's uses for it, but we've got to work together and figure that out. And for myself, watching these Phragmites, for some reason, I've been noticing they're not as, I think when I first learned about them, I go down the thruway, go down the road, anywheres, they're everywhere. But now
Yeah.
it seems like they're not as much, because we weren't really seeing the cattails, but now we're seeing a lot of the cattails again. So I don't know what that switch is, but something's been working for us here. But yeah, we just got to figure out what we can use it for. And like Ange said, the mullein, there's so many uses for that. I mean, a lot of people refer that to as the TP, the toilet paper, I mean, we find uses for it is, and then the important thing is not taking more than we need. And you mentioned earlier about how can we honor and I think that would be something that we like to share with everybody, that you only take as much as you need, and because everything has a spirit, everything has is there for a reason, and just be respectful to the natural world. That's it.
Yeah, great.
All right, thank you for your answers and thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
People are writing great things, and I just wanted to say with that, we're going to move into small groups right now to just do a little bit of debriefing with small group around what we've heard, what we think, what our feelings are, and then we'll come back and do a little feedback with Angie and Hazel and Maureen and anybody else who's here. We were first going to share a song. I'm just not going to sing the whole thing, but because it's kind of very emotional for me right now, but it was a song written by Marie Summerwood, who was an herbalist and a good friend of the Onondaga Nation. And she wrote it for Shay Resnick Gertz, who was when he was little in the choir. And so Deb and Carol are here tonight also. Both Shay and Marie have died in the last few years. So I want to sing this for them. And I think it's such a great song to talk about our relationship. It's called, the words are, "The earth is my friend and you are too, people. I honor my friend in all that I do. You're my friend, earth, you're my friend." And then it was a zipper song. So the trees are my friends and so are you. I honor my friends in all that I do. You're my friends, trees, you're my friends. So it goes like this. I'll sing a line. The earth is my friend and you are too. So you sing it with yourselves. The earth is my friend and you are too. I honor my friend in all that I do. I honor my friend in all that I do. You're my friend, earth. You're my friend. So let's start from the beginning. The earth is my friend and you are too. I honor my friend in all that I do. You're my friend, earth. You're my friend. You can sing it to yourself because you're the only one that can hear you. So let's do another one. The trees are my friends and you are too. I honor my friends in all that I do. You're my friends, trees. You're my friends. The plants are my friends and you are too. I honor my friend in all that I do. You're my friend, plants. You're my friend. You could sing this all day, reminding yourself, ourselves, to honor and do everything to connect to all that we do every day to connect to the earth.
I love it. This is Allison again. So we're going to transition into some very brief small groups to connect with each other You'll have about 4 to 5 people in your group. And it's to talk a little bit about the Honorable Harvest principles, which are not written down, but if they were, they would sound something like this. Ask permission of the ones whose lives you seek, abide by the answer. Never take the first, never take the last. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Take only what you need and leave some for others. Use everything that you take. Take only that which is given to you. Share it as the earth has shared with you. Be grateful, reciprocate the gift, sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. So those are also in the chat for those who can see that. In the small groups, we'd like you to, at the very least, each take a moment to notice what you're grateful for in the natural world. So everyone should have a turn to say what you're grateful for. And then if you have time, of the principles, which one speaks to you the most, or any other reflection about the content this evening. So we'll be whooshed away to some small groups briefly, about 7 minutes in that, and then we'll come back for some announcements and appreciations for the evening. So we always end with appreciations for each other and for our guests. So look forward to speaking with a few of you briefly in small groups.